Hello and welcome to today's edition of Between the Spreadsheets. I'm Stephen Englander, and with me today I have my friend Robert Festenstein, who is the sole principal of RHF Solicitors. Robert's here to tell you all about the problems that are incurred in the legal world and how you can make best use of a solicitor. So you weren't always a solicitor, were you, Robert? You came in a bit later.
For a period, I sold different things. I was a salesman for a period of time.
Okay.
I sold different things: computer leasing, laser printers, and I got bored. Really, I didn't see myself selling things forever. Actually turned out to be wrong, because as a solicitor, particularly in the work that I do, you end up selling.
You're always selling things. It's a bit like me. I went back to accountancy late in life, but not because I was bored, but because I ended up going bankrupt. But that's a different story. Because I figured, what can I do now that I don't actually have to work for a living? So
Sure.
if I'd have known what law was about, I'd have probably gone into that, because that's even easier. But
the benefit of qualifying as an accountant, of course, is it gives you an automatic legal qualification.
I suppose, yes, but not to the degree that the clever people get, like become lawyers. But a lot of our clients, in fact, almost all of our clients and people watching this podcast are small businesses. So what do you think? I mean, we are living through difficult times at the moment, unusual times, but where would you say difficulties are really going to come from for small businesses? What area should we be bracing for?
I think in no particular order. Obviously, debt is going to be high up there on the list. And I think that any small business that resumes after the restrictions are lifted, I think the first thing they would need to do is a root and branch examination of the nature of their business.
How does that work?
It's pretty straightforward, really. What it is they do? Who do they supply to? How do they supply? And what resources do they need in order to supply that?
Yeah. So know thyself.
Yeah. Yes, it is. So
always good advice, that. So what do you think, as far as debts coming up, there's going to be a lot of people that are unable to pay debts. And how can your firm step in, and how should they step in and help with this type of thing?
I think the starting point is like I just said, the root and branch thing. Problem sometimes is that people who run small businesses sometimes just want to put the company into liquidation without realizing that they're causing significant problems for themselves. If you've got to do something, then if you have a number of options, say 1 to 5, don't go to 5 first. Just work your way through it.
Yeah.
Number 1 might be, well, is there an informal restructure we could do? Is it possible that we have maybe 10 members of staff? Could we reduce that to 5? Examine the people that you do business with. Are your best customers really your best customers? Sometimes people who pay you a lot of money actually don't make you very much money. Your margins might be low. They may be very demanding, might be slow in paying. And whilst it might hurt initially to stop dealing with them or try and renegotiate, you may be better off without them. I mean, that has an impact, obviously, upon the turnover. But if you make yourself a more efficient, leaner entity, then your prospects of being able to survive into the future are enhanced.
No, that's very, very good advice, and I hope everybody's listening to this. We experience this quite a lot with clients, and we're often saying to people, look, that guy's a big client, but they're not actually making you any money. I mean, it goes back to the Pareto principle, doesn't it? The 80-20 rule.
Yes.
That 80% of your income might come from 20% of your clients.
Yeah.
And 80% of your aggravation and non-payment might come from 20% of your clients, but it's not the same 20%.
No, it's not the same 20%. Yeah. And what we have here, a couple of principles, one of which is, and it actually isn't quite as bad as it sounds, but it's if people start complaining about the fees, we normally stop dealing with them.
Yes, yeah, that's actually a very, very good logic. Yeah. So looking at it on the flip side, you've got people that owe you money.
Yeah.
So how do we manage that? So, all right, we shouldn't have been dealing with them. Our credit control should have been a bit better. Circumstances come up. Yeah. What should we be doing to recover that money?
I think it depends on why they owe you the money. So, for example, if you in this crisis, It may be that people were previously good payers and now can't because they have their own problems. So working with them is always the first best step, because if they're otherwise good clients, you want to keep them. And I think as a supplier, you stand a better chance of retaining their business if you are understanding of their problem when they really need the help. And that's always a complaint I have with people, that everyone's really good when business is fine, but when business is not fine, then those people they thought they were pally with suddenly turn against them. And if you can afford it, if you can help people through their work with them, for them to pay you yet continue to do business with them, that's the best possible outcome.
Yeah, it's you've got to really know your customers there, don't you, as well?
Yes, you do. And there are occasions though where people just don't turn out to be the people you thought they were.
Yeah.
And there's two problems with that as a small business. The first is the personal one, because they're not a number, they're a name.
Yeah.
They're a face.
Yeah.
And if somebody lets you down, then you do feel let down personally, rather than it being another business issue. And then secondly, how do you deal with it?
Yeah.
And sometimes you can't get over the first, and that is often a big reason why people come to see a third party like me.
Yeah, see, sometimes it is the principle and not the money. Sometimes it hurts you.
Yeah.
I know I've dealt with people for decades, and we've still had this. Even through this COVID outbreak, we've tried to work with people, and the vast majority of people, they've really tried hard to make sure that they're paying us. But you get a few that the minute lockdown broke out, our payments stopped. And but these are always the ones that we have trouble with anyway. So it's there's a way through all this. I understand what you're saying. So you do quite a bit of dispute resolution, don't you?
We do.
And how does that work?
Okay, so it depends on whether we are chasing the money. I mean the client is chasing the money, or the client is being chased. Obviously, if you're chasing, then you have a greater degree of control, because you have a number of things which are available to you, whether you try and just demand the money and issue the claim, or whether you avoid that and try and negotiate a settlement. On the other hand, if you're being chased, then my advice to people when they want to try and pay by installments is always, if you're going to pay by installments, always pay the first installment when you make the offer.
Why is that?
Because it shows intent. If you owe somebody £10,000 and you can say to them, I can pay you £1,000 a month, then if you pay £1,000 with your offer, it buys you an enormous amount of goodwill. And if later you end up in front of a judge and the judge says, how did we get here? And the defendant says, well, I tried to settle it. I paid them £1,000. The judge will say, well, hang on a minute. What did you do? So sent them a letter, sent them £1,000, tried to settle it. And the judge will often turn to the other side and say, hang on a minute. What did you do then? Did you then have a meeting? Did you try and go to mediation? What efforts did you go to, given the goodwill clearly exercised by the people who owe you the money?
So the judge is always looking for cooperation with everybody and good intent.
Cooperation. But in a real world, if you are owed the money, and the first thing that someone says to you is, I can't pay you all now, but here's £1,000 to get us on the way, it's a very, very big deal, because it reinforces the seriousness of the intent of the person who owes the money.
Yeah.
So many times people come to me and they say, oh, well, I'll start paying him from the middle of next month. And my answer is, well, why don't you pay them now?
Pay them now, yeah. Yeah, waiting for this check to clear, or waiting for this.
Well, maybe, and that's a possibility.
Yeah.
In a business like this, often the small businesses are at the very bottom of the pile.
Yeah.
So they're waiting for everybody else to be paid, and then the money
Absolutely.
in their account.
No, it is a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hence, keep your house in order before we even start. So, what do you think about? What's your personal opinion on IVAs? How do you think? I knew you'd pull that face. That's what I think as well. But what are your thoughts on them?
The thing about the individual voluntary arrangement is it sounds good if you say it quickly.
Yeah.
And again, this is back to the know yourself. And in the same way as I'd say to a company is work out, do a root and branch analysis of where you are. Always say the same thing with individuals. And again, this is a process 1 to 5, and 5 or 4 would probably be the IVA, or 5 might be bankruptcy, but it might be the other way around.
Yeah.
You need to understand where someone stands in relation to their personal life and their business life, or income and expenditure, before giving any advice as to an IVA.
Yeah. It's the difficult, isn't it? Because with debt, it's emotional all the way around.
The thing with the individual voluntary arrangement is this: is that the idea is that you gather all of your debts. So maybe you've got £50,000 worth of debt, probably credit card debt, and you do a deal with your creditors through an insolvency practitioner who becomes your supervisor. It's called an individual voluntary arrangement. It's a formal insolvency regime, and the idea is you pay a certain amount a month, maybe £250, £300 a month, over a period of time, and that money is then paid to your creditors and all your debts are cleared. There can be some problems with that. The first is you might not be able to afford it. It's simple as that. The second is that there are sometimes little clauses in the agreement which says you've got to remortgage your house after 3 years or 4 years. If it fails, then all the money you've paid is gone, and the creditors can come back against you again, the people you owe the money to. They'll say, well, look, you paid me 20%, I want the other 80%.
Yeah. Plus you've got the insolvency practitioner's fees.
The fees come out of the money that you pay, so that's not, that's included. So if you pay, say, £300 a month, then their fees might be £45 a month, for example. That would come out of the money.
Yeah, it's quite a lot. Yeah.
That's a less significant. The big deal is whether or not the IVA is the right course.
Yes.
And so there's lots of different there's lots of different things to consider. So the first is, who do you owe the money to? If you owe the money to say Barclaycard, it's unlikely that by the time you get to the position of trying to negotiate with your creditors, the Barclaycard has still got the debt. They've probably sold it.
Right.
And they'll have sold it to somebody for a percentage. So you might, on the face of it, owe £10,000, but someone might have bought it for 2,000 or maybe 1,500. Mm-hmm. So doing a deal with them directly rather than going through an insolvency practitioner is often a better idea.
Yeah, yeah. So that's one thing. So I hope everybody's taking this on board. But
can I stop here, because there is something very, very important that I need to make clear. Mm. It's not always a good idea, let me phrase it like that, to pay the credit card debt instead of your mortgage. Mm. The mortgage is a secured loan, and the bank or building society will generally be more relaxed about you missing payments because they know at the end of the day they'll get their money. Right. Just by selling a house. The credit card companies won't get the money because that's an unsecured debt. There's no full fallback position for them. Mm. And so what you need to do as part of this know your own position is to work out the difference between what are called priority debts and non-priority debts.
Or better still, give you a ring.
Yeah.
So your number will come up at the bottom here.
Absolutely.
We're just moving away from debt for now. Looking at another problem, a big problem, and I've mentioned this on previous podcasts, that a lot of employers have, are problems with their employees. Yeah. So your practice must be inundated with problems with employees.
Not yet.
Not yet. Oh.
Not yet. When the furlough payments run out,
yes,
and redundancies start happening, I am sure there will be a massive influx of claims of people saying that they were unfairly selected for redundancy.
So what are the main problems in general, regardless of COVID, do tend to come from staff in when they're complaining or taking employers to tribunals?
So they normally start with something fairly minor. And in small businesses, it's very, very hard because often the people who run the business are also the HR department. Mm-hmm. And it becomes very, very personal. It really does become a toxic environment, and often people try and avoid dealing with it instead of actually taking the bull by the horns. I suppose the biggest deal is if you're an employee, then your concern is that somehow you're being eased out, or you're not being treated fairly, or somebody else has got to the coffee machine before you, or they can park in the car park and you can't. I mean, these are small things, but they become very significant. I mean, the car park actually is a classic example. Often what will happen is a business will have 5 spaces, by way of example, and it's on a first come, first served basis. But then what happens is that the people who get in first, obviously, they get to park, and the people who come in later can't park and they have to go off and pay. Now, on the face of it, you think, oh, that's not very exciting. I'm not very interested in that. But there is a very significant problem, and it's this. If you are taking children to school and you can't get in the car park first, and you have to then go and pay £5 a day at the place around the corner, then there's in my view, a pretty strong argument that that's discriminatory. That you are not being put, you are not in the same position as the other people who do not have children or have different arrangements to enable them to get into work first. And that's how arguments can arise.
It's not really that petty, and I suppose it goes back to what you said before about debt, to look at your own house, to try and consider all these eventualities.
I mean, that's actually that's quite a serious point. But sometimes you can get minor ones over who sits where. Somebody wants to sit by the window. Somebody doesn't want to sit by the window. Somebody gets cold, and and the answer sometimes is very straightforward. There was, I remember one occasion, there were people who got very, very angry over whether the window was open or not. And it turned out the person who wanted the window was further away, and the person who didn't want the window open was right next to it.
Right.
So, swap round.
Or push them both out.
Or push them both out,
Yeah.
The difficulty with that, though, is that if you're on the ground floor, buggers will just come back in.
Yeah. No, I get your point. You're thinking like a lawyer now.
It is employee issues are very, very can be incredibly taxing.
Yeah,
be very, very draining. And one of the, I remember, I won't say who, but some years ago we had they weren't solicitors, they were employment advisors. And I had a guy working for me called John, who was an absolute, utter, complete nightmare.
Yeah.
And he had been, I had pretty good evidence that he hadn't acted honestly, and I wanted to sack him. And the advisor said, oh, well, you know, we're not sure and we don't know. And one of the reasons that they were so cautious was because they sold, as part of their package, a insurance policy, which meant that they would cover you for legal costs and for any award in the event that you lost, provided you took their advice. The problem was I had to take their advice for months and months and months. And it would have, in hindsight, it would have been easy just to sack him, just to sit him down and say, look, you're a thieving git on your bike. Yeah. And he would have then brought proceedings, and I suspect that all that would have happened is either he would have lost or he might have got a couple of months.
Yeah. But it's hassle. It's all money and hassle.
It is money. And it's not only that, it has a detrimental impact upon the other members of staff, because they think, well, we're working hard, we're starting on time, we're finishing on time, we're not taking lots of cigarette breaks, or we're not taking lots of toilet breaks. And it's, you know, they just feel pretty much devalued. And I think under those circumstances, what you will probably do is just suspend the person straight away. Get them out of the business immediately, and then try and deal with them.
No, it's true. I was once listening to a podcast with some billionaire business guru, and he was being asked over the years, what's been your biggest mistake? And he very quickly said, when I've taken over a management team, it's not parting company with certain members of staff straight away, because your first instinct is usually the best one.
Right. Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah. No, it is. We become the bad guys with members of staff, because it's like they seem to get away with so much, and it takes you ages to spot it, and then ages to prove it, and then ages to come to the conclusion that you're not really mistaken. And in the meantime, I knew this lady once years ago, terrible woman, but very well spoken, very nice. And one of her MOs, if you like, was she'd get jobs. She'd research big companies, and she'd get a job with them. And her attitude was, well, I can't do the job, but I sound the part, or sound as if I can do
Right.
it, and it takes 3 months before they can spot that I actually don't know what I'm doing, and then 3 months to get rid of me. So I've got at least 6 months worth of pay, and this is going back 25 years ago, and she was targeting income between 50 and 150,000 a year, and sometimes she'd have a couple on the go as well. But this is that stuck with me, and I've seen so many people. I mean, this client's this he was actually a supplier of software, and he actually said to me, "Do I know anyone looking for a job for his wife?" So I said, "Oh, what's she looking to do?" So he said, "He doesn't care. We're just trying for another baby, so she wants the maternity pay." And I thought, this is horrendous, but nobody ever speaks about this. Nobody ever brings this to the forefront because we're all very PC when it comes to employees.
Well, I'll tell you a story. I'll tell you a story. My late mother was a doctor, and she went for a job, and I can tell you when it was. It was 1959, late 1959, and they offered her the job, and she said, you need to know that I'm pregnant. And they said, "Oh, just wait a minute. Do you mind stepping outside?" And then they called her back in and said, "Well, we rescind the offer."
Oh, couldn't do that today, could you?
No, you couldn't, and that's part of the problem. That the law is quite a rigid thing, and I think what happened to my mother was absolutely disgraceful. But I think that what your software supplier was saying was also pretty disgraceful as well. That I understand that they're looking for a job so that they can then have a family and use the employer to basically pay for it.
Yeah.
Now, but again, that's not black and white, is it?
It's proving it, though. It's proving that intention.
It's not only that, but is the idea that he is so certain as to their joint fertility that he knows that she'll start on the 1st of March, that she will be pregnant, and also is the plan then to completely work her way through the first pregnancy and then again a second?
A second, yeah.
You don't know, do you?
No. Well, I think having kids is punishment in its own right as well. But why the employer has to take that on board, I don't know.
I think it's difficult, really. I mean, I remember when the children were young, that I'd been qualified, I can't remember, maybe 2 or 3 years, something like that, and my income had gone up. I remember my mother saying to me, "You must be doing quite well now."
Yeah.
And I said, "No, I'm not." And she said, "Well, why not?" And at that point, we were paying £8,000 a year in nursery fees.
Wow.
And it's still the case. It's still the case for people. You go to any supermarket late at night, and you chat with the person on the chat with the cashier, and very often you'll say, "Why do you mind working these hours?" And they'll say, "Well, actually, it suits me because if I didn't work now, I couldn't work."
Yeah, there is this, but surely that should be a government issue, not an employer's issue. It's difficult, isn't it? Because the law is what it is.
I think the way I suppose it's very hard. You can't say, "Well, you've got to be, you've got to work for 12 months before you're entitled to maternity rights," and then someone that says, "Well, we got pregnant earlier," or something like that. It's just, it's hideous.
Well, it used to be the government paid it. You just knocked it off the national insurance bill.
I think a contribution is certainly.
Well, we'll have to see where society goes if it's give and take, but it's a difficult one. So we've talked about debt and dispute resolution, which is always a good idea. If you can talk before, what's the saying? Talk before litigate, or
something like that.
It's something like that, isn't it?
Churchill said, "Jaw is better than war."
Yeah, that's probably a variation of that. And we've talked about general employees.
Yeah.
Are there any other points of law that you think stand out for small businesses?
Yeah, and it's really boring.
Okay, well, let's go with it.
This is really...
Accountant, a solicitor. We're not going to be the most interesting show on the planet.
It's wills and shareholders agreements every time.
Okay, wills and shareholders. Yeah. I don't know why people don't have wills. They should have wills.
They should have wills.
Yeah.
It's just, I think that
Just remember, if you don't have a will, the government gets it all.
no, sadly,
Don't they?
that would
Let
be.
people take that.
So if you die intestate, there's a whole
Yeah.
series of rules which
Oh,
apply to who gets the money and who gets the first amount of money and in what order. It does make matters quite a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
I think that the benefit of making a will is one of certainty.
Yeah.
And it's often the case that people say, I'm not ready to make a will. And the answer is you should always be ready to make the will, because then if you get hit by the proverbial bus, then your family are catered for. And
You're making sure that the people you want it to go to also get it. And there could be some tax advantages to create a will.
But the big deal with these things is often it's not the tax or who gets it. It's the incredible amount of upset that you leave behind you.
Yeah.
Somebody I know who was younger than me who passed away as a result of COVID-19, and they didn't make a will, and the grief, the added grief as a consequence, is appalling.
Yeah.
Absolutely dreadful.
Does your firm prepare wills?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so down below you can see how to get in touch with Robert if you need.
The other thing I would say with this, the other thing I would say about it is what we also do is help people where no will has been made.
Yes.
And often what will happen is that the surviving spouse will not know what to do. They'll think it's going to be incredibly expensive and complicated. It's not cheap. It's not a 40 quid job, but it is not complicated either if you know what you're doing. We can help people through that. And again, because we're a small firm, we deal with people, not numbers. So if someone rings up and they say, can I give you my reference? The answer is you can try, but it's not going to mean anything.
No, very good. Well, listen, Robert, thank you very much for joining us. And as hope everybody can see, Robert's very approachable, knows his stuff, and you can contact Robert direct at the number below, or you can contact me and I'll put you in touch with Robert. But Robert, thank you so much for joining us.
Stephen, it's been a pleasure.
And I'll speak to everybody shortly. Thank you.
All right. Cheerio.
Bye-bye.
Bye.